The American Civil Liberties Union of Virginia held a news conference to reveal a summary of their findings in a report on solitary confinement in Virginia state prisons. The ACLU of Virginia defines solitary confinement as any practice that isolates inmates in a small cell for 22 to 24 hours a day with little human contact, reduced or no natural light, and restrictions on radios, TV, reading material, and visits with friends and family.
For 23 hours a day.
You can be sent to solitary for
disobeying a direct order.
Order 6.10.
Fighting is 90 days extra. Yelling too loud.
Somebody's labeled a gang member.
any kind of drugs.
Looking at a correction officer. Just looking at him.
Having too many rolls of toilet paper is 90.
Claire Guthrie Constanyaga is the executive director of the ACLU of Virginia.
We hope that our resulting report, Silent Injustice, will shed light on this inhumane practice and that it will motivate the Department of Corrections, other correctional officials, political leaders, and the public to demand and provide better conditions for people housed in our state prisons and our local and regional jails. While our report focuses largely on Red Onion and Wallens Ridge, the findings, discussion, and recommendations are applicable across the system. The report discusses the negative impacts of solitary confinement as practiced in Virginia, the systemic difficulties prisoners have in escaping and returning to the general population, the failure to exclude individuals with serious mental health problems from solitary confinement, despite the existing law and science establishing the especially damaging impacts of isolation on these vulnerable people.
Michelle Griffin's husband spent 7 years in solitary confinement. He is still incarcerated, but no longer is in solitary confinement.
From a family standpoint, I have to let you know that it's a lot of stress on the family when you have a loved one in solitary confinement. Oftentimes, we assume that their length in solitary confinement is due to actions, maybe against the guards or something negative. Every time William came or was getting to the point of being released to population, something would happen just out of the ordinary. For instance, jamming your food tray in the cell door got you an additional 6 months in solitary confinement just because there's no oversight, there's no accountability. Nobody's holding you accountable to, or the COs are not being held accountable to these charges that are given to you. Family members are often met with a lot of resistance when we begin to advocate on their behalf, calling the facility, speaking to the counselors to find out what we need to do, not to work against you, but to work with you to help our family members now proceed to the general population.
Griffin said at one point her husband wanted to give up.
Sometimes I'm at the point that I be wanting to write the judge, say, just give me the death penalty.
I will tell you that it kills the spirit. It kills any desire you have of any type of hope, reform, of anything of coming home. You believe, you come to realize that you really don't have much of a voice. There's nobody advocating for you, and you begin to just lose the fight and lose the hope to live. And at one point he did. He had completely given up any, any desire to live, because all the days, he said, began to run together. And, why am I sitting here day after day after day with no end in sight? There's nothing there for me to even help myself. And any measures you take to improve yourself, they begin to ostracize you then. And there's other forms of abuse if you begin to make yourself a better person, because they look down at you as though, what right do you think you have now to reform yourself?
David Smith spent 16 and a half months in solitary confinement at the Norfolk City Jail.
So as Claire was saying, it's small. It's a parking space. It's a cinder block and concrete box. It's worse than where we would put any zoo animal in America today. The lights never go out. They just slightly dim.
Smith shared one of the scariest moments he experienced in solitary confinement.
Terry made me hopeless, feeling like there's nothing else I can do. I'm stuck here. I remember one day they were tarring the roof, and we were up on the 7th floor, and it smelled like the building was on fire. And we started off pounding on our cell doors because the COs wouldn't come. If you press the button, they're supposed to call them, because there's nobody actually on our wing. It could take them 15, 20 minutes to show up. So we smell what smells like the building being on fire. It's like we're pounding, nobody's coming, and you eventually feel like, this is how it's gonna end. Because that's where your mind goes when you have that separation. We have that isolation, you just lose all hope.
Executive Director Constanyaga closed the news conference with a call for action by the Virginia Department of Corrections and Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam.
We start by calling for a change in transparency and accountability from the Department of Corrections. They can't any longer cover over what's going on by calling different names. We need data on who's actually being housed in segregated or restricted housing or solitary confinement, and we need to know exactly why they're there and how long they've been there. We call for a change toward greater humanity in the policies, practices, and laws put forward by the Commonwealth that impact people who are housed in correctional facilities. We call for a change in the way we talk about solitary confinement, including understanding the real suffering being inflicted not only on the people who are housed in that condition, but their families, friends, and loved ones. Look, a lot of the changes that we're advocating could be implemented tomorrow by the people in charge of our jails and prisons, but they haven't been, and it appears that it may take laws requiring change in order to make something happen. And that, of course, will take time and commitment, and we stand here today united and resolved toward that goal. At this particular moment in time, though, there is one person who could act immediately and make significant positive change, and that's Governor Ralph Northam. We called on Governor McAuliffe to make some changes, and they didn't happen. So we have a new governor, a governor who understands mental health issues very directly from his professional experience, and we are asking him today to sign an executive order that would ban solitary confinement for members of vulnerable populations and limit its use to rare and exceptional cases for the shortest duration possible, and make sure that it doesn't last longer than 15 days where it is determined to be actually necessary for people's security. And we're asking all Virginians to join with us today to let the governor know you agree that it's time for these changes. And you can do this by visiting our website, acluva.org, and completing our action alert that calls on the governor to issue an executive order immediately, urging him to bring humanity and compassion to our state corrections system. He can't directly impact what's going on in jails, but he can directly impact what's going on in our correctional facilities. And he can set a standard for what the local and regional jails also should do.
Earlier this year, Virginia State Delegate Patrick Hope introduced House Bill 795, which would have prohibited placing inmates who are mentally challenged in solitary confinement and would have prohibited keeping any inmate in solitary confinement for longer than 15 days. That bill was quietly deep-sixed and never made it out of the subcommittee. Rabbi Charles Feinberg said he had a receptive interaction with current Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax about solitary confinement.
A group of us did meet with the Lieutenant Governor recently, and he showed some interest in the issue, so we'll see if we asked him to bring it to the governor's attention as well. So we'll see if that bears any fruit or not.
Governor Northam's predecessor, Terry McAuliffe, wouldn't move on solitary confinement. According to Constanyaga, the former governor denied that we even have solitary confinement in Virginia, since it isn't called that by the Department of Corrections. The term the Department of Corrections uses is segregation. Hopefully, for the sake of these inmates and their families, Governor Ralph Northam won't play word games like his predecessor and will be man enough to address the issue once and for all.
We support the recommendations, and we ask the governor to put an end to this practice. Thank you.
In downtown Richmond, Theo Whitelow for Breaking Through.